Scott Dobie was all about climbing the corporate ladder, enjoying success and promotions and financial stability. But some things have happened in his life that you're going to hear today that really changed the way he looks at things. And right about now, he's sort of on this precipitous edge. No, I think he's actually got 1 foot off, and he's stepping into what some may call the abyss. But what Scott is looking forward to is a change of direction for the rest of his life. I'm Jim Martin. This is Adventure Rider Radio. Stay with us. We got a good one for you.
Sam Manicus, Simon Pavey, Helge Pedersen, Connie Bowman, Chris Birch,
Elizabeth Martin,
Jocelyn Snow,
Quentin Smote, and you're listening to Adventure Rider Radio.
Green Chili Adventure Gear offers American-made, heavy-duty luggage systems for all types of motorcycles. You can turn any dry bag into luggage using their strapping system. And of course, Green Chili Adventure Gear is tested in extreme weather and terrain to withstand the abuse that adventure riding gives it. Tough, reliable gear. GreenChiliADV.com. Best Rest Products is the maker of the Cycle Pump, the best tire inflator for motorcyclists. You can inflate a flat tire in less than 3 minutes. Is founded, assembled, and warranted for life in the USA. They're also the inventor and retailer of the combination tire iron / wrench, the Hex Wrench. CyclePump.com.
My name is Scott Dobie. I am from Prince George, British Columbia. My LinkedIn used to say I was a supply chain operations and logistics professional. Now it says I'm a motorcycle adventurist. So that's my current status, but I am working.
Scott, welcome to Adventure Rider Radio.
Great to be here.
Your LinkedIn profile is I mean, that's really for business, isn't it? So don't you kind of get excluded from that once you change it to, the adventurer?
Absolutely. I've used a couple career transition professionals in the past, and the last one was quite distraught that I had changed it, but I am who I am.
Well, let's go back because I want to start with you working for large corporations. So what were you doing? Supply chain management?
I had worked for large companies in my career. I'm from British Columbia, but I spent 18 years in the States. So I was working for large corporations, one specifically down there for 12 years of the 18 years I was down there. I was recruited back to British Columbia, another large organization, a government organization. In the meantime, we had twin boys while we were down there. So 18 years in the States, and then I've been back in BC ever since. But yes, working for either large government organizations or large companies.
So there must have been a time when you really enjoyed that. I mean, you were striving to probably advance and enjoy the large corporation.
Yeah, definitely we waited to have kids, 13 years. So when we were together, so I spent that time climbing the ladder.
Is that why you put the kids off?
Yeah, one of the reasons. The other reason, my wife and I are polar opposites, so we wanted to spend some time together. But yes, definitely career oriented. I was with that company for 12 years, 18 total in the States, and I pretty much made my way through that career ladder with that company the whole time I was there. When we had the kids, that changed everything. I wasn't interested in that ladder anymore. We both wanted to go back home.
You're polar opposites, and that's why you want to spend some time together? 15 years?
Well,
I mean, you really want to make sure at this point.
Well, I was also pursuing my career, right? And right. I was traveling. I was traveling all over the U.S. In that pursuit, and so we were living that lifestyle. Making more and more money, having nice vacations to Hawaii and other places, and kind of doing that without kids lifestyle.
I wonder what your kids will think when they find out they were delayed.
Well, they know.
They know already. But I wonder if down the road you're going to get blamed for something. If you had us 10 years earlier, I could have done this.
I had a gentleman that worked for me when I was in Seattle, and he said, don't worry about it. You're going to mess up your kids somehow. It's not if, it's just when. And so don't stress yourself out about that. So
yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And even if you didn't, you will get blamed for doing just that anyway. It's
absolutely
all a matter of perspective. So you move back to where are you from British Columbia. What did the kids do to your ambitions for corporate ladder climbing?
It's at the time and before kids, it was, so cliche, kids change everything. Your life is not the same after kids, and, on and on and on, and which I really never bought into. But it's true that my priorities completely changed. I had moved my way through this company. I was managing the third largest distribution center in the US for this company. My next stop was LA, and then after that, back to the corporate offices back east was my path. So when we had the kids in Denver, I got promoted back to Seattle. I wasn't interested in going. Both of us, early in our relationship said if we ever did have kids, we wanted them raised in Canada to have that experience, knowing they'd have travel, access to both sides of the border.
So you're somewhat disillusioned with your path at that point. So what happens?
Yeah. So I could have gotten a job in Vancouver almost immediately, but I didn't want to exchange Seattle for Vancouver. I was raised in northern British Columbia, and I wanted, my kids to have that experience. But I was raised in very small towns. And quite frankly, I wouldn't mind going back to a small town, but my wife probably would not go with me. She's a city girl, or was. And so I waited for the opportunity to find a job that, that had the income that I was looking for, that I could tap into my skill set I've been building over the years. And so it took about 4 or 5 years. And then the opportunity presented itself to relocate back to British Columbia and to northern British Columbia with a large organization.
Oh, I see. You were waiting. You were still working in the U.S. and as you're looking for this new job. Then you finally get it, and that's when you move back.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. But it's still another corporate job, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So actually a large government crown corporation.
Mm. So how do you find yourself on a sailboat going from, Honolulu to the Marshall Islands?
Honolulu, the Marshall Islands, yeah. So in 2017, I had the opportunity to crew a sailboat that was going from Bellingham, Washington, with its end destination in the Marshall Islands, Majuro, the Marshall Islands. It was going to be done in a couple different segments, from Bellingham to LA, then to Honolulu. And then the boat had to wait a couple months for typhoon season to pass. And so it did that. And then the last leg was Honolulu to Majuro, Marshall Islands. So that's the portion that I signed up for.
But you're a dad. You've got the kids there. You've got the corporate job, the government job. There's a disconnect there. How do you end up on crewing a sailboat?
I had some sailing experience in the past, being from Washington State, but only like inside the islands. No open ocean. Mm-hmm. But I was getting to that point where I was getting restless. I was getting restless, and I was looking for something outside of that realm of, corporate job, parent, husband. I had a motorcycle at the time, but up here in the north, not a lot of riding, in the off season. Mm-hmm. So I was getting restless. This opportunity came along, and quite frankly, when it came along, my first response was, "Oh no, I was apprehensive," and then I immediately became irritated that I was apprehensive, because I've never been apprehensive in my whole life. And I thought, oh no, I'm getting old. Oh no.
But had you jumped at adventures before like this? I mean, if somebody comes to you and said, "Hey, we're moving a bus from here to there. Do you want to come with us?" Would you pack up and leave?
So short term, I've always been that way to a certain extent inside the context of, the other parts of my life. So, I got a call one day and says, "Hey, can you drive a double-decker bus?" And I'm like, "I can drive anything." I'd maintained my commercial license, and it's like, I didn't even ask the what. It was being moved. They needed a driver to drive it. And I'm like, yeah,
I was just pulling the bus out of the air as an example.
I was into fly fishing for a while.
Go back to this bus here. It says double-decker bus. So what did you do with it?
Oh, so I was living in Seattle. I was living in Bellingham, actually. And I got a call from someone who passed my name along, and a car dealership had purchased a old English double-decker bus out of Vancouver. It was old. It was right-hand steer, of course, but it was manual. And they needed someone to move it from Vancouver to the car dealership in Bellingham. And so someone passed my name along as a commercial driver. I hadn't commercially driven in years, but still had my license. Called me up and said, "Would you be interested?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And that was it. I mean, they ended up paying me, but I didn't ask. I didn't just like, "Yes, let's do it." That sounds cool.
So what did you do? Just take time off your job and go?
Oh, it was just from Vancouver to Bellingham. It was, it was probably, it's just probably an 8-hour gig, once we got through customs and that sort of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I pheasant hunted, I fly fished, not all consecutively, but I would get into something and then just jump, headlong into whatever I was interested in.
What does your wife think of that?
My wife is very, very long suffering. So, I think, and we spent some, time, just her and I, for a number of years after we were married without kids. So, at one point she decided, she was just going to get used to me. So I guess that's what happened.
We mentioned the sailboat. You going on the sailboat. The sailboat trip didn't exactly turn out like you'd planned. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I flew to Honolulu. I flew in at night. I had one day, and the boat was going to be departing the next morning. Very excited. Flew into Honolulu. Went to my hotel. Was picked up by one of the crew. Following morning, we took me down to the boat, and that's when I looked at the boat, and I quickly realized the boat was not ready to go. The boat was in disarray. I've done I'm not a professional sailor. I have a certain amount of knowledge, but I've always been able to follow instructions. So, I was counting on that. But right from the get-go, the boat wasn't ready to go. So I had concerns right off the bat.
What do you mean when you say it wasn't ready to go? What kind of things are you looking at?
There again, not a professional sailor, but there was still repairs to do. There was rigging that wasn't in the best shape. The sails were just piled everywhere. This is, one day before departure. This is not the way I would expect a boat to look.
Oh, it doesn't look organized when you show up.
My goodness. It is a mess, and everybody's frantic, which, immediately, because the boat was parked there for 3 months, my expectation is this would all have been done.
Sure. And do you know anyone else who's on this boat?
I was, some people. Yeah. I had some, extended family members that were on there, and then people that I didn't know. So it's a mix.
Does anyone else express concern of the state of the boat?
Not openly at that time. Maybe there was some quiet concerns amongst conversations, but everybody was just tucked in, trying to get everything ready. So we spent that whole day running around, getting parts and pieces, and then at the end of that day, the captain decided the rest was just we were going to do underway, which was a concern.
This is a 46-foot boat?
46-foot Morgan. Yeah, it was a blue water boat. So it is a boat designed for open ocean.
And what happened with the boat trip?
So I was really hesitant to get on. And so I had a really battle going on. Like, I was excited, but I was hesitant. I had tons of evidence that this was not, I think back to Jackie Furneaux's book. She has an experience about getting on a boat or not.
Right.
And, I related to when I read that book because she was really back and forth, and her instinct was telling don't do it, but she ended up getting on, and it was a challenging experience. I was having that same situation. Every ounce of my being was say, do not get on this boat.
Isn't that's crazy? That's Hit the Road, Jack. That was her book.
Yes,
we had her on the show and talked about it when she brought that book out. But isn't it crazy how you get this feeling before you go that you shouldn't do something, yet you push on? What made you push on?
Well, I was battling with this time in my life where I was getting apprehensive. I mean, age and experience and, quote unquote wisdom, so I think I always relied heavily on my gut. Every single time I went against it, it didn't turn out to be the best situations. But I think in this situation, I was doing this battle with, is this apprehension you're just getting old and, apprehensive? And it irritated me, so it was and then, I'm a dad and a professional and responsibilities and the whole, I think I was really just not wanting to let go of that kind of former self or whatever. I don't know. I was in quite a mental battle. But
you went.
I did.
You ended up regretting that decision.
Overall, yes and no. I mean,
We'll talk about what happened.
It was an amazing trip, right? It was an amazing trip. So we set sail. I had prepared. I had the proper gear, but immediately it was evident that this just wasn't. It confirmed I wasn't in the best situation. The emergency life raft was buried underneath a whole bunch of cargo, like a dinghy and boxes and stuff like that. And typically on a voyage like that, you do man overboard exercises.
You practice.
You should be practicing so the crew knows what to do and blah blah blah. And none of that was happening. And as I looked, the life raft was inaccessible. There was a lot in the boat that was, they were working on and fixing. So with that said, we put to and we sailed. It was going to be approximately a 20 to 25 day trip. The captain was pushing the boat very hard, which, started some discussions around the crew. And for sailors out there, when you leave Hawaii, you're in a bit of a wind shadow until you reach the trade winds, and the trade winds were going in the direction we needed to go. So you'll see sailboats with, kind of the sails slicing through the wind. When you're going with the trade winds, all the sails are wide open, tip to tip, it's called. And so we're being pushed by the wind rather than. So at night, as a safety precaution, you're supposed to, what they do, reef down the sails. So you diminish the size of the surface area that the wind's coming against. And it's a safety precaution. If something sneaks up on you at night, you don't see it on the radar, storm or otherwise, you have some, certain amount of protection from that wind. And that wasn't happening.
They were leaving the sails out full.
The captain was leaving the sails out, everything out full. And there was almost nightly discussions about concerns with that. At one point, the cook refused to cook anymore because the captain was driving the boat so hard and she was bouncing around all over the galley. So there was trouble on board. 900 miles out offshore of Honolulu. It was later in the evening. My shift was from midnight to, my shift was 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. to midnight, my solo shift as far as steering the boat. So we had one of those discussions that evening about the boat being driven as hard as it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was again unsuccessful. So I was starting my shift. So I went down below. I can't remember why. I was preparing for my shift. So I went down below. I had my automatic on. So I had I had a harness / automatic life preserver. It was a 2-in-1, so I could attach myself to the boat, but it was also a life preserver. So, when the water hit it, it would, inflate. So, in a boat in the open ocean, you don't go down below with this device on. If there's any problems, issues, you don't want to have this thing on when water's rushing in. And
why not?
Well, you get down below, if there's any kind of accident, any kind of, if it's triggered down below and you have to evacuate, through incoming water, right?
It's going to pin you to the top of something.
It's going to hold you. So you're going to have to take it off, but then you're going to get on the other side and you won't have it. Right. And so you secure it on the outside. So anyways, I didn't do this. And went down below. And moments later, we were hit by a storm that came in behind us. So we're going with the trade wind. So everything's coming up from behind us. Because we were in the conversation that we were all in, no one was watching the radar. So I was down below. The storm hit from behind. And these they come in fast when you're in the open ocean.
How fast?
I went down below, and within, I would say, less than 2 minutes, it was on us.
Oh, wow.
And there again, the discussion was continuing to go, on deck. And I just, because I was starting my shift, I just left it and went down below. But no one was watching the radar.
Well, this is one of my favorite devices, the Atlas throttle lock. There's several reasons that I'm so taken with the Atlas throttle lock. First, it just works beautifully. It's got 2 buttons on it, one for engage, the other for disengage, and that's as complicated as it gets. Those buttons have a tactile feel that sort of tell your thumb what you're doing without having to look. To me, that's safety. Engage the Atlas throttle lock, and it holds your throttle position. You can roll on more throttle, roll off without disengaging. You just make the adjustment, and it holds the new position. You turn it off with a press of a button. Another bonus is the incredible design of the Atlas. It's like really well designed, like a Swiss watch. It fits on your bike in minutes. It swaps from bike to bike easily, and they have a fit for almost every bike, and there's only 2 variants. I think there's only 2 variants of it. That shows how adaptable they are. Lastly, though, it's the release in my fingers, my hand, my wrist, my forearm, even my shoulder that are worth every penny of the Atlas throttle lock. The Atlas throttle lock has to be the finest throttle lock on the planet. And get this, it was also invented and sold today by riders just like us. AtlasThrottleLock.com. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. AtlasThrottleLock.com. Almost 5 years exploring the world by motorcycle. That's what Renee Cormier did. Then Renee founded Renadian Adventures or Renadian Motorcycle Tours. So when you look at the lineup of the trips that Renadian does after 14 years in business, it's really no surprise that many of these adventures are derived from Renee's original favorite places that he discovered exploring the world. Renadian runs trips in Africa, Canada, Scotland, New Zealand, South America, and Mongolia. Africa is certainly very popular for Renadian, so much so that they have a full-time crew in South Africa to help with logistics. And something else that is unique to Renadian is the chased van. The van's there for the usual things to support the ride, but it's also got 12 seats in it for those that want to go on the adventure with you, the rider, but they don't want to sit on the back of your bike. So they can grab a seat in this van. This van's got huge windows in it, large glass windows, got air conditioning, a fridge, freezer, USB ports. It's dialed for comfort. Now, another point of interest, and that's Renadian.com is their website, but another point of interest is that Renadian has another company called Canadian Motorcycle Rental. CMR, Canadian Motorcycle Rental. They've got locations in Kelowna, Penticton, that's in British Columbia, Calgary, Alberta, Toronto, Ontario, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. Canadian Motorcycle Rentals has newer BMWs to rent, so you can do your own adventure. Fly in from somewhere else, rent from CMR, and you're on the road. Great also, if you're visiting a friend, you want to ride with them, you don't have your bike because you're flying in, you just rent the bike from Canadian Motorcycle Rentals. Or if you're coming in for another reason, maybe business or whatever, you just got a few days to ride, rent a BMW from Canadian Motorcycle Rentals. Their website is CanadianMotorcycleRentals.com. Anytime you're dealing with Renadian.com or CanadianMotorcycles.com, mention that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. So it hits you, and what does that feel like?
It feels like someone comes along and grabs the boat and throws it forward. So if you can imagine, every bit of sail is wide open, and the wind hits the sails. What ended up happening is the boat pitch pulled. So there again, for non-sailors, when a boat pitch pulls, there's too much wind hitting the sails, so it ends up pushing the boat and the nose forward, and it keeps pushing and pushing and pushing because the air can't evacuate, and eventually the nose goes in the water and the boat flips, and so that's what happened.
The boat flipped
on its side. Yeah. So wow. I was down below. I was thrown from one side to the other, and then I was completely buried in everything that was in the cabin, boxes and equipment and everything. I was buried and laying on one side. So on one porthole, I could see water, and on the upper porthole that I could see out, I saw stars. So the boat was on its side.
Terrifying?
Yes. Initially, it was a really strange experience. You always wonder when you're faced with, potential death, mm-hmm. how you'll react. And, initial panic, but then a realization there was nothing that could be done. Like I was buried, I couldn't move. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And so I actually was quite calm.
What do you mean? You just lay there?
Yeah, I was pinned. I couldn't. I was buried in too much stuff. I couldn't get out from underneath it. Very fortunately, those boats have a very, very large and heavy lead keel. And so the boat wants to, if able, to self-right. Because, the water was coming in and I was resigned to, just to see, just accept. So luckily, the boat self-righted. Once it went to the side, it was no longer being pushed by the wind, and so it self-righted. When it self-rights, it takes the path of least resistance. So when it self-righted, it was perpendicular to the wind, and then the sails came down, and we didn't sink.
Wow! And does that change your feeling for the trip at that point? Once I got free of where I was, I came out of that boat and, I was participating in the discussion, with the crew, but I got very more pointed when I came out of that cabin, and I don't really remember what I said. I was quoted as potentially saying, either the captain goes over or we slow this boat down because, he's going to kill us all. And so that's what happened is the boat slowed its pace and we continued on. This is all in part of your sort of quest for adventure, because you were saying that you were sort of you're seeking adventure. You're questioning yourself at this age, sort of wondering if you still have it, whatever it is, as far as feeling adventurous. Did that do it for you?
No. In the sense of we finished the trip. I was in really bad shape when I got to the Marshall Islands. I had lost over 20 pounds. I was having a hard time hydrating. I learned a lot about hydrating that trip. It was warm temperatures, high humidity. You get busy. There was always things to do on the boat. I was fishing. I was having a good time as well. But yeah, I'd find myself, I would, get dehydrated. And then your body can only absorb so much fluids, right? So you could drink, 5 gallons of water, but once you're that dehydrated, but your body will only absorb so much. So it was really important to keep a constant flow of fluids going in. So I was really struggling with that. So when I ended up in the Marshall Islands, I had dropped about 20 pounds, and I wasn't really doing well physically and wasn't really doing well mentally when I arrived at the islands. There's only 3 flights a week to that island. So I had a couple days. My wife had called ahead to a hotel, the hotel on the island, had booked me in, but she'd also let them know that I had a pretty rough journey. And so when I got there, oh man, they took so great care of me, but not in a fussy way. Like I would go down for breakfast and I would order a breakfast and I would notice that there was just so much extra food on the plate as not described on the menu. And so spent 3 days on the island. Then I flew home and I went back to work.
Back to the grind.
Yeah, I think I lasted a week at work, and I had to take some sick time because I was really struggling mentally. I was thinking, just, bad experience, but you live through it, can't you? It's great. But I was struggling. So I had to get some help. I had to go to book some time with a counselor and kind of help me get through that.
That's as a result of the capsize of your experience on the boat, or just the time in life?
Well, I think the experience on the boat was the initial conversations. And then, towards the end of those sessions, probably a little bit in time in life. But I had some kind of like I would be driving home from work, and the feeling would come over me. I would panic like I was being chased, and I would drive home like at a ridiculous speed and come tearing into the driveway, all just like freaked out, like someone was chasing me, and no one was chasing me. That type of thing. And so yeah, I had some problems when I came back. Some issues.
Right. And this is around the time where like you mentioned you already had a motorcycle. This is around the time where you decide to use a motorcycle as an adventure tool.
Yes. So not going to go out in the water anymore.
Was that a decision? You said that?
I always said I never like to go on, like never would consider a cruise, because I'd never want to go on a holiday I can't walk away from if it sucked. And then yet I get on a boat. So yeah, I was done with boats.
Yeah. Well, and I always think it's bizarre when I hear stories about like this, like you just told, about going on a boat like this as a crew member and not knowing everybody that's there, because, we used to do tours and we had people come out on groups who butted heads. And these were people who would not get along no matter how long they were together. They would butt heads. And you end up with that and stuck in 46-foot boat is a big boat. I know, a reasonable sized boat, but that's not a lot of space.
Yeah. And, but I, with all that said, there was times, there's nothing like being in the open ocean like that. It's a completely unique experience, especially at night. The boat had autopilot and all the latest gadgets, but I loved hand steering at night. I remember a couple nights in a row, I believe I want to say Venus was just off to the left side of the moon. And so I hand steered because Venus was right in the line of where we were going. And so I would hand steer, using the stars. And it was just, there was amazing experiences like that.
I can see that. I can imagine that. That would be really neat. So when you transition to motorcycle, talk about that.
So I've always had a motorcycle. Always, I grew up with dirt bikes. I left home when I was 18. Didn't have enough money for a car, so my very first bike was a Honda CB250, which was my mode of transportation. And so I've always had a motorcycle. So I had a 2001 Kawasaki Vulcan Classic FI 1500. I bought it in 2001. We had the boys in 2000. I've always had a motorcycle, and for some reason, somehow, I didn't have one. and I thought, oh no, I just had two kids.
It's happening.
It's happening. And the end of this story is, when you retire, you buy your motorcycle. So I immediately ran out and bought this brand new motorcycle right from this. And I had it. I was the single owner. So I bought it in 2001. And 2006 is when we moved back to BC. 2017 was the boat trip. So 2018 was my first big trip north. I took my bike to the Yukon.
Vancouver to the Yukon?
We were living in Prince George at the time.
Prince George.
Yeah. So, yeah. But still, from Prince George to the Whitehorse, which is the beginning of the Yukon, it's a 22-hour ride. Mm-hmm. And then you get into the Yukon after that, 6 hours on to Dawson City. And then, so still, yeah, big distance, big trip.
What about your wife and your kids? What do they think of that?
They're used to me. This is not, like I said, my wife's always been supportive of, these adventures that I pick or choose or these interests I have. And fully disclosure, not happy all the time with it, but, it's who I am. It's so, yeah, I would imagine there was a level of concern, but I've been riding motorcycles since I was 18. So a lot safer than a boat.
Is that statistically?
In my case.
Yeah. Well, I guess that does make sense. So you went to the Yukon in Alaska. Yeah. Did that do it for you? It
started that. I had watched, as many have, The Long Way Around with Ewan and Charlie. So I went on this trip with this bike, and it was kind of the gateway to, hey, this is the kind of riding that I want to do. I had a street bike. It was a very big, heavy cruiser. Mm-hmm. So, there was going to be no off-road. Well, there was going to be no planned off-road. I got to Dawson City. I was going to rent a vehicle from a truck rental company, which I was kind of surprised. I mean, there's like 50 people who live there. So I was surprised that they had a truck rental. Ended up being a guy with 4 trucks, not really a truck rental place. But when I got there, my plan was I was going to park my bike with him, and then I was going to take the truck up the Dempster Highway and go to Inuvik. The road hadn't been pushed through to Tuck yet. When I got there, the truck wasn't there. The previous person who had rented it hadn't returned, and they'd actually started a missing persons on him because he was long overdue. And so I hate going backwards, as many riders do. Don't like going backwards. So I did a quick search, found this highway called the Top of the World Highway, and that it came out in Alaska. I'm like, oh, I'll go that way. And there was a lot of road construction. And so I next morning I went across the ferry. I started up the highway, and then it turned to gravel. And I thought, oh, road construction. And an hour later, I realized this is a dirt road. So I had a little off-road adventure on my big bike. I think normally it takes, proper bikes, 4 to 5 hours to get through. It took me 11 and a half to get across there. But yeah, I got to the other side, finished my trip. I went into Alaska. I went down into Haines Junction, took a ferry to Skagway, came up through Carcross, White Pass. It was amazing.
And you said you'd watched Long Way Around at that point. So you sort of, I think you said you were bitten by the travel bug, the motorcycle travel bug.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to explore that more. Definitely. The bike, that trip, it was awesome, but the bike was not the bike that I needed, to go down, to do that sort of thing, like as I wanted to do it. Yeah. And
you saw Charlie and you, and so you're thinking you got to get a different bike.
I need to get a different bike. Yeah. Mm. So I started looking. I didn't know what to buy, so I started reading and looking. I ended up buying a Honda Africa Twin from a gentleman in Calgary. He had completely outfitted it, bought it completely outfitted. His plan was to do a big trip. And then him and his wife had twins. And so I believe I bought that bike over the phone. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was 2019. So February 2nd, I set out to Calgary to pick up the bike.
Now this is winter. It's cold.
It's winter. It's cold. It's cold and blowing snow. I was raised in the North. I got my driver's license in the winter. My wife was not thrilled about me going, but I was excited about getting the bike. And so I left on February 2nd, and the weather got progressively worse about 3-4 hours in, but not turnaround terrible from my experience. Mm-hmm. I was driving. I saw a truck in the road ahead, and quickly realized he wasn't moving. He was actually parked. He had stopped in the lane with no lights, nothing blinking. As I approached, and unfortunately, trucks behind me didn't, and so I was struck multiple times from behind and from in front. Not in good shape.
What do you mean? They hit you into the truck that was stopped?
Yeah, I didn't lose consciousness to the whole thing, but it is kind of sketchy. I was hit multiple times from behind and then in front as well.
Wow.
They figure the first well, one of the trucks that hit me was doing in excess of 100 kilometers an hour. So yeah, I was medevaced from there to Jasper and from Jasper to Edmonton.
And what happened to you?
Fractured my back, cut my face in half, broke my nose, cut head to toe. I was in rough shape.
That's horrible. That's just horrible. So what do you do with that?
Yeah, I went to Edmonton, I went to, Jasper first of all, and Jasper has an amazing hospital with an amazing trauma center because there's a ski hill there. So, went there and was assessed, and then they're like, yeah, this is way more than they can handle. So off to Edmonton. I had surgery. My face was cut in half diagonally, and my nose was broken. And so it had to be, my face had to be put back together. I had a fracture in my T12, but fortunately the disc went right back to where it's supposed to be, and it didn't break all the way through. So after multiple scans and this and that, they decided it'd be best to let it be and see if it would heal up on its own, and which it did long term. So that was fortunate.
Wow. How long did it take to recover from that?
I was down for about 3 months. The gentleman that I bought the bike from held the bike. Steve, he's awesome.
Right.
So he held the bike, and sometime down the road I came and got it. But and I also bought the bike. It was a DCT, which ended up being really fortunate. It got me back riding sooner than if I had a regular bike. It was easier to ride, less. My left side was, in bad shape or whatever. But I was out for 3 months.
DCT is dual clutch transmission. It's kind of like an automatic.
Yeah. So I loved it. I mean, I bought it because I was curious, and I really liked the bike, and it was outfitted, and I didn't know a lot about it, but I ended up loving it, and then also it got me riding way quicker in my rehabilitation than a normal bike would have. So I enjoyed it.
See and be seen. That's the motto at Cyclops Adventure Sports, and they make that happen with their incredible lineup of LED lighting for motorcycles. No matter what you ride, I'm sure you're going to find loads of options at Cyclops Adventure Sports, but their Tough Light turn signals, I think, are something that should be on every motorcycle, in my opinion. Certainly every adventure motorcycle. Tough Lights are LED turn signals that replace your stock ones with LED lights that are brighter, they draw less, and they're tougher than anything you'll ever find on a stock bike. Anything. Tough Lights go even further by turning your turn signals into super bright driving lights in the front and then super bright brake lights in the back / turn signals, of course. So when you tap that rear brake, man, the light show that you get in addition to your regular brake light in the back is incredible. See and be seen, right? And man, are they tough. If you drop your bike on your stock turn signals, they're usually going to end up smashed, leaving you with an expensive repair. And worse than that, no signals or no lighting for the rest of your ride. Tough Lights just fold over. They get mashed underneath your bike. And as soon as you stand your bike back up, they spring back into position. I've got them on my bike. They're absolutely amazing. Virtually indestructible. CyclopsAdventuresports.com is the website. Mention Adventure Rider Radio anytime you're dealing with them. CyclopsAdventuresports.com. Nothing beats confidence for riding in the dirt, or even on the road for that matter. And that's what IMS Products foot pegs do best. Inspire confidence, because IMS foot pegs increase the connection between your foot or your boot and your foot peg, the most important connection when you're standing. And they do that with racer proven designed, backed by super tough cast certified 17.4 stainless steel that's been heat treated with a certified heat treatment. They are everything that you would expect from race proven technology, yet they're actually designed specifically for adventure riding. So whether you ride hard packed wide fire roads or tight rocky trails, they have a peg to suit your style. IMSproducts.com is the website. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. IMSproducts.com. Way back when you, in your story, when you were going to go on the boat, you're sort of on a quest for adventure. Where does this put you on your quest for adventure now?
That's a really good question. I think adventure had taken a little bit of a after the accident, a little bit of a step to the side. It was about recovery, and then it was about getting back to the freedom of my movement. I mean, the bike ended up becoming really a part of the therapy and the mental therapy. Riding that bike afterwards was absolute bliss. So, I was, I say I've experienced all the types of pain there is: bone pain and flesh pain and ligament pain and nerve pain. And so a lot of pain, and you can only take the narcotics for so long after an incident like that, without risking, you risk addiction if you stick to them too long. So eventually you come off them, and so was in a lot of pain, and being on the bike was just bliss. So that, I think, for a long period after that, it was not really a search for adventure, but just a search for, that relief of recovery. Once I got back to work, I'd ride back and forth to work. I'd ride on the weekends. I would ride in the evenings. I would ride any chance I had.
What is it about riding the bike that you feel helped with your therapy?
Another good question. I think partly is a sense of control after these situations of no control. But it's very simple. It's you and the bike and the sound and the scenery. It's just a very therapeutic experience.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, when you think about it? Because with especially non-riders, they see motorcycles as a dangerous thing, and almost something that people does with a cavalier attitude. You're not taking life seriously. Yet we hear of this where, like in your case, and it sounds like it had a significant effect, a positive effect on your therapy, on recovery, on centering you again in life, just riding the bike.
Yeah, absolutely. In those. I did, after the accident, had to go back into counseling again because I was, I was officially diagnosed with PTSD and having problems yet again. But it was definitely a part. You have to work your way through with help when you get that deep into a situation like that. But the bike was just almost like it paused everything else, and it was just me and the bike and the ride and the scenery. It was heaven.
At what point does travel start to show up on your radar again? Like that big trip, that big motorcycle trip or that style of trip.
So that was 2019. So that year was about, rehab and recovery. And then the next year was 2020. And I went back to work, and I'd been with that large company for 4 years. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I just didn't have it anymore to do and perform at that level what I needed to with, what the demands of a large organization and company and corporate and all that sort of thing. So I've been very successful with that company, myself and my team, but I immediately went back to work once I was able to, and just struggled.
Is that something that they recognize as well, or just your feeling?
I think it was recognized around me. I was really close to my team. I worked for a Canadian entity of a large American corporation, and so my leadership was all down in Washington State and Oregon State. So I didn't really have daily contact with them face to face. But it became evident. I had lost my filter, which you really need in corporate.
You were speaking your mind.
And I just couldn't handle the day to day, the day-to-day pace, and I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to. I was saying what I was thinking more, which is not a healthy situation in a corporation. So
I always picture corporations as like to get up the corporate ladder. You've well, I don't want to say kiss butt, but I mean that sort of thing. You got to bite your tongue and know when to speak. You got to play by the rules.
You got to play by the rules. And I had a long career, and I remember being told at one point, by a director, it's like you're either in the river or you're on the shore. So you need to be in the river with the rest of us, not sitting on the shore, which means you need to go along with the flow and support what, it's to be succful.
Play
that's
the
part
game.
of it. Yeah. And I was broken. I couldn't and didn't want to do it anymore.
What is it? Why no filter? Like, what is it that made you change your outlook?
Well, I was in flux. This was my second experience that I figuratively walked away from.
Experience with death, you mean?
The death experience. Like I remember talking to the police officer a week afterwards, and I for the most part, I didn't lose consciousness, which I wish I had in hindsight. But I had this memory of police officer. I was moved to a cab of a truck to stay warm. And I remember this police officer coming up, and I don't remember what he said, but I just remember my memory of him was just seemed so happy. And I thought, well, that's weird. This is a terrible thing that just happened. Why would he be happy? And I remember talking to him a week later, and I said to him, I have this memory. It's like you were happy. And he says, well, that's because I was. And he goes on to explain, like when he approached the scene, he's like, where's the body? He was talking to people, and he was told, oh, it's in the cab of the truck. He's in the cab of the truck, and he's like, whoa, why would you put the body in there? He was preparing himself for a fatality,
Right.
And so when I didn't die, he was extremely happy. So, I was in flux. And everything. We do what we do sometimes because that's what we've always done, and that's what we're supposed to do. Go to work and be successful and take care of your family, which are all good and normal things. But it just didn't make any sense to me anymore.
Was the motorcycle a part of that as well?
It was that taste of that freedom and joy and everything that was not every other part of my life at the time, our family's close and is still close and always been close, but I was in flux mentally and physically. And so, I ended up leaving that job. I thought the answer was working for a smaller company. I actually wasn't able to hold a job for more than 12 months from that point forward.
You mean you're getting fired, or you're just quitting?
No, I was quitting and going to something. So I went to a smaller company, smaller compared. So that wasn't the answer. So I thought, well, maybe I just need a smaller company and a smaller group to manage. I was still going to my counseling. And that's when, my counselor at one point I said, all I want to do is hop on my bike and ride to South America. That's all I want to do. I don't care. I just want to go. And he was an awesome guy, awesome therapist. And he let me finish. And then he was just great at asking great questions. Wouldn't it suck to be in the middle of South America and realize you hate camping? And I'm like, whoa, yeah, it would. So he said, maybe you should take shorter trips. Feel it out. And so that's when I started, with the bike, taking some, trips and shorter trips, like, most normal people do, a week, 2 weeks, that sort of thing. So, but it was just enough to kind of bring me down and center me and get my logical part of my brain to start figuring. I'm a professional, a logistics professional. So, spontaneity is not part of our training. And
which is kind of strange for you. That's a juxtaposition to say that's what you do as a profession. Yet you just told me that you jumped on a sailboat because the opportunity came up.
Yeah.
You drove a double-decker bus because the opportunity came up. That doesn't sound like the other description that you're talking about.
So I think there's a kind of a dichotomy between the two. In hindsight, easier to see, right? I was responsible. I was pursuing, a career. I was doing all the things I was supposed to do. And then I would take these opportunities to kind of jump off the proverbial boat and go off and, be free, but then always come back, and after the accident, I didn't want to come back. So yeah, when you asked me that question, it reset me, and it's like, okay, I really started to accept that, everything costs in life, and it's not always money, right? Any decision, I also accepted that I probably wasn't in control of my life like I thought I was, and definitely accepted the kind of philosophical approach to, none of us, I believe, are. The only thing that we can control is our decisions and our choices. And after that, it's the consequences of those, whether they be positive or negative.
And many or much of that is completely out of our control, and much of it we have no idea as even comes along. Things just happen. For instance, you driving to pick up that bike, in your truck. That's just one of those things. That's one of those events in life that could never be predicted. You can't see that your decision to buy a motorcycle is going to end you in a hospital in such a terrible state. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think, because of my profession, it's like there was a belief that everything can be planned. All variables can be addressed.
Right.
It's an illusion. It's an absolute illusion. And then along comes COVID, and if anybody was clinging to the illusion, for my case, it annihilated it. Right. So 2019 was all about recovery from the accident. I had actually, unfortunately, one more event a couple months after that. I've had kidney stones in the past. I know what they are. So I had a kidney stone. There was a complication that was left over from the accident. And, a long story short, ended up in emergency, with a kidney stone, which initially was kind of low key, blah, blah, blah. It's not, a terrible situation. But because of this complication that was unknown, without getting into the gory details, I almost bled out in the emergency room. And so if there was anything left hanging on to of what I used to believe or think, that was the last straw, right then and there.
In what way?
In that if I was hanging on to any leftover beliefs, or after the accident, I remember with my counselor in a different session, I'd get stressed and I'd just say I was done. And he kind of helped me. I was referencing, a work situation, but he helped me understand it was more than that. I was done with this life I was living the way I was living it. And so that changed everything.
So talk about that. What changed and how?
From that point forward, I was, I was looking down the road and saying, okay, how do I want the next 10 years to look like? Like, what do I want? What do I want it to look like? And so that's, after the experience in the hospital, and then 2020 coming along, I was really on that path of what do I want it to look like? And I had no idea.
But you're asking a question there, it sounds like to me, what you want it to look like as far as you thinking of your personal life more than worrying about what your career is going to do.
Absolutely. My and quite selfishly, me only, I was questioning everything. I'd stopped all my regular activities at that point. I used to go to church with my wife. I used to quote unquote normal, going out with friends or whatever. And just all that fell away.
And you're riding at that point?
I continue to ride. Yeah. So 2020 hit, lots of time on my hands. I was working in the transportation industry. So I was at essential service, but I listened to every episode of Adventure Rider Radio. I listened to every episode of Raw. I read 20 some books. I read Sam's books. Well, I started off with Ted Simon, because there was that piece in Long Way Around where they met Ted Simon. So I Googled Ted Simon. Oh, he's got a book, right. Jupiter's Travels. I read Jupiter's Travels. I buried myself in Adventure Rider Radio and Raw. I read Sam's books. I read Shirley and Brian's books. I read Michelle's books. I was just reading everything I can get my hands on, Jackie Furno, everything, just immersing myself in that. Mm-hmm. So I spent 2020 to 2022 riding and reading and listening.
And you're going down the motorcycle travel wormhole.
Absolutely. Living, breathing.
Right. Scott, what I'm curious about here is because you were talking about, you're looking at the 10-year thing, and you're sort of thinking of what do you want? Someone suggests to you. Where does your wife fit into that? Do you ever have conversations with her where you're saying, like, where do we want to be in the 10 years or how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, that was ongoing too. When you have, especially the accident, right? I think, I don't think we were all a bit traumatized, my wife included. Yeah, there was conversations going on, but, I didn't really know how do you talk about something, how do you talk about something when you don't even know what it is? And I was just immersing myself in riding and reading about riding and traveling. And so, yeah, there was discussions, but at that time I think we were both kind of still in recovery.
Your wife is not a rider, I gather?
Pillion. Yeah. But doesn't.
Okay. So she will ride with you.
Yeah. And so as I was spending more time on the bike, she started coming with me.
Nice.
The Africa Twin, I think it was Shirley that said the Africa Twin's rear seat was designed for a 10-year-old boy. My wife would agree.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And so, I'd sent a question in for the Raw panel about, pillion riders and comfort and bikes and that sort of thing. I remember Grant kind of finished off the segment was kind of saying, well, looks like you're buying a BMW, buddy.
Come on. There can't be only BMWs that have a comfortable rear seat. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, I don't know. I ended up buying a GS. With my wife and I went to the dealership. She sat on it. She rode on it. She loved it. Said, this is the one. And so we ended up buying a GS. And
wow, that's really interesting. You go in and you buy a motorcycle all for the pillion seat.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Well, she was, as we were kind of going down this road, and the kids, the boys had, they had moved out, I think, getting towards 2022. And so as couples do, the kids go out the door and you're like, okay, it's just you and I. And so we were looking for things that we could do together. And we've always, we've been together for 39 years now. Motorcycling, we did together before kids and a little bit after kids. But that was one thing that kind of she expressed interest in, something we could do to start doing together. So we did. I kept the Africa Twin, but I bought the GS, and her and I took a trip up to the Yukon in it in 2021. And, I couldn't ride like I had ridden in the past. No one wanted to ride with me. They didn't like the way I traveled. For me, the holiday was the riding. And so I just loved to ride. So I would ride, 8-hour day, 10-hour day, 14-hour day. I just loved it, Now physically, I can't do that anymore. I got to get off the bike every hour, and stretch. Now I can only plan 6 hour, kind of riding time and do it in 8. And so her and I took a trip to the Yukon in 2021, and to kind of dip our foot and experiment with, traveling together on the bike.
Is this with the thought of possibly doing this?
Yeah, in my head.
Did you tell her that's what you were considering? What's your wife's name?
Pippa.
Koopa?
Pippa, Pippa.
Pippa. Oh, I see. Pippa.
Yeah.
So Pippa. Does Pippa know this is what you're considering as you're riding two up, or is this just a vacation as far as she knows? She's
been with me long enough to know that when we're off doing something, and I was planning it with her, and there again, Shirley, in that segment that I asked the questions, and Michelle too, I think, was stressed upon me the importance of the pillion having a role, playing a part, Yeah. And so it was kind of the first trip that I've taken on a bike that, the riding distances were lower. We talked about where we were going to stay, what we're going to do. It was definitely it wasn't about, it wasn't about the time on the bike, but it was about the time together on the bike at that point.
Mm-hmm. You went on a simplification spree, I think you called it, of getting rid of things. Talk about that. What is that?
Yeah. I started to think at that point that, this is what I wanted to do. I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but all the books I read, I developed a relation, kind of an online relationship with Sam Manicom at one point. And then I was reaching out. Tim Burke was the first one I reached out to, because everything I was seeing, I asked him a question because he was on a BMW, and everybody seems to be on a BMW, and so I guess that's the bike you buy when you want to travel, blah, blah, blah. And my scope was really narrow in what I was looking at. And he came back and said, "Oh, brother, there's everything out here, and now I know and have seen that, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted, but I wanted more of that, and then, and so my relationship with Sam kind of started as many do. It's just kind of an online back and forth. And then as we communicated more and more, I asked him more questions, and I really appreciated, his point of views that he shared, especially in the raw programs. There's those that can, and those are just unable. And, do you want to retire with money, or do you want to retire with memories? Those type of things help begin to sort me out where I wanted to go. So traveled in 2021 with Pippa and had a wonderful trip, and she had a good time. We were practicing off-road riding together when we got that bike. And so we ended up in Dawson City. I was going to go up to the Arctic Circle. The road to Tuck was in place, but Northwest Territories was still COVID closed. So she decided that was a too big a jump for her. So I went up and did the Arctic Circle, came back to Dawson City, and had a great trip.
And Pippa waited for you.
Yeah, she was staying, as many riders will know, she was staying at the bunkhouse, which is, motorcycle and adventure, people central. And so she had a great old time. She's a very personable, loves to talk to people, and she had a great time. And I went up and I met some riders, a couple from the UK, a couple from the States, a fellow Canadian rider. We all ended up at Eagle Plains together on that trip, and had a great time.
She sounds like the perfect travel companion.
Yeah, she we've been, we've traveled off and on, but she's the one that strikes up the conversations. I'm typically the one that stands in the background.
You came up with a plan at this point, is it to do a bigger trip?
So in April of 2023, there again, I was pretty much changing jobs every 12 months. I thought because COVID was such a different experience for everybody, as far as, from provinces to countries or whatever. Mm-hmm. I ended up on the other side of that, very appreciative and had a lot of respect for those that work in healthcare. And so kind of in my searching mode of like, well, maybe I'll find some happiness in healthcare. And maybe I'll work in healthcare. My poor recruiter, he's like, okay, really? Healthcare?
Poor recruiter. They're making money off you, aren't they? Every time they find you a job?
They are, but it was such a stretch from, typically I've had more industrial jobs.
Right.
That sort of thing. But anyways, so yeah, I went to work for the health authority. Loved the work. I absolutely loved the work. I worked in between supply chain and the healthcare professionals, and just loved the working with healthcare professional part of my job. But I was back into a government job, and it didn't take too long, that it was just soul sucking, that other part of the job, dealing with that part of
bureaucracy.
Yeah. And I had my filter had long since broke. That job ended in 2023, April. And May 1st, I packed my bike up and said I was going to go on a trip. And I left May 1st.
You said so Pippa is not going with you.
No, at that point I was done. I needed to figure out once and for all, what my life was going to look like. And so, I packed my bike up and I was off May 1st. So I headed south. It was a big snow winter.
Just before we get into that, I want to go back to that sort of simplification spree that you were on.
Oh, yes.
About selling things off. So what was that about? And what did you do?
That was about funding my trip, because I had no savings per se. I had retirement things I could dip into, but that I didn't want to. I'm responsible. I love my family and my wife. I'm not just going to leave. So I had all the finances organized to keep everything at home going for 7 months.
Oh, I see.
And so if I was gonna, I had a number of bikes. I bought. It was a nostalgic buy. I bought a CB 250. Years previous.
Because it was your first bike.
It was my first bike. I had, I still had the Africa Twin. I had my big cruiser. I had parts and pieces of other bikes. So I just went on a selling spree. I discovered Facebook Marketplace, and I sold all my bikes except for the BMW. And then I just kept selling. I sold anything I hadn't touched for a year. I sold.
Now, is that for money, or is there a feeling you get by getting rid of the stuff?
Well, both. Not only for money, but it's like, okay, I know, I don't want to, we have a nice house on 2 acres, just outside of town, remotely, beautiful little neighborhood, but this is not where I want to end my story, So I think it was both. I had come across a book, 2 guys out of California, minimalists, and they talk about living a minimalist life and how they went from these big corporate jobs and they downsized and sold, but so I just like, okay, that's, they did it and that's what I need to do. So yeah, I just started. So partly to fund the trip, absolutely. But partly just I knew I wanted to go down this path of a simpler life, in that so I could make the changes to travel more,
So this trip that you took, and you said you left May 1st, this was the big trip. This was what you'd read about. This is what you've been listening to on Adventure Rider Radio and Raw. These are the people that have been talking about it. You're about to embark in this story on this big trip. What did that feel like?
It felt awesome. It felt nervous. It felt, at that point, I had reached out to so many people to Sam, to Jeremy, to anybody, that, I kind of had a group there that I would just pick their brains, and that's the amazing thing. It's stating the obvious. People who travel, for the most part, are anxious to share and willing. Mm-hmm. And so, but I also set out a little bit naive. I would say I was book smart, but this was definitely bigger than anything that I had done on a motorcycle before. So there was excitement, apprehension, but I indicated to my lovely wife, well, how long are you going to be gone? Well, probably a month or two. But back to everything. I was at that point where I have to decide, right? It has to be decided. What the next chapter looks like, and understanding there may be costs. I maybe come back from this trip and my keys might not fit in the door anymore. She's a very long-suffering person, loves me dearly, and I love her. But, so it was just kind of stepping off the edge and just to finally just step off the edge and go.
Were you still seeing your therapist at this point?
He retired.
Oh, so he abandoned you.
No, I wasn't. I think my motorcycle is my full-time therapist now.
Is that right? Oh, that's incredible. So this trip, talk about, what was the plan?
Well, I had no plan other than I don't want to be cold, and I didn't have a destination per se. The most common question you get asked when you pull, when someone comes up, oh, where are you from? I'm from Sisters. Where are you going? I'm headed such and such a direction. I don't have a destination. There was an HU event, Horizons Unlimited event, that I wanted to go to. I was talking to Sam. Sam was coming over for his speaking tour during the summer. I had a lot of kind of points, but I didn't have a destination. I never had a destination every day. I either decided that evening or that morning, and it wasn't really a destination. It was a direction. So I did the whole trip without, I had, a few things that I was going to do, but no destination.
And are you looking for a light bulb on this trip? I mean, because it doesn't sound like it's just a vacation. You're saying, this is like a deciding point for you. Is there something that you're expecting to see in the horizon? You're going to wake up one morning and it's going to be there?
No, because expectations is where disappointment goes to get life. And so I had no expectations. I had no firm plans. I had no destination or direction. I knew that I hoped that being out there, I also, when I started this trip, I said, I'm going to say yes to everything. I'm just going to say yes to everything, short of, getting me in jail or deported.
Right. But safe things or safer things.
Yeah. I mean, just say yes to everything because, in my profession, you're cautious, you're conservative, and, and so it's like, no, I'm just going to say yes to everything, which was amazing, quite amazing. But no, I don't remember a specific purpose and expectation. All the reading I'd done, all the listening I'd done, it was going to happen out there. Whatever was going to happen out there. And I just wanted to get out there.
And you told Pippa you're going to be 1 to 2 months. So Ushuaia was not the destination then?
No, I was kind of limiting myself to the Western U.S. and Canada at that time. I had thought about, potentially going down into Mexico. But there again, my awesome counselor, wouldn't it suck to be, blah, blah, blah. So I thought, okay, I'll pick a context and make that the Western United States and Canada. I also had learned about the backroad discovery routes. So my plan was, as I traveled, to ride all of them, or as many as I could, and then the other thing, I bought a national parks pass.
on coming back, did it work? Did you find what you were after?
Yeah. I was definitely, yes, I did. So came back from the trip. I had one of my sons had started with a small company here back home. And he was just saying what a great company it was to work for. The owner was awesome. The business was really successful, but they were having growing pains. So my intent was to come back, sort out my affairs for the next 3 months, take 3 months to sort out my affairs and then travel. And then the question was, would Pippa, would I go out and travel? And then she would kind of, I wanted to go to South America. So, would she come to me? Would she come to Colombia and I would spend 3 months, and would she come, for a week or two, travel with me? So the conversation was ongoing about whether we, do we go down together, or does she, come down and spend time with me as I travel around? We were working that out. That was the intent. We're going to sell the house and get ready for this bigger trip.
And what happens?
Well, so I ended up starting a conversation with the company my son was working for. And it was I was talking to the business owner about business. I had no intentions or desire to go work for him. And we really hit it off. But there again, I was just going to be here for 3 months. But in the meantime, my son and daughter had a boy, my first grandchild. And he ruined everything. There again, the cliches, you hear grandparents talk, and it's wonderful. It's different than your kids. It's just this and that. And so, yeah, I fell in love with that little human. And it's like, so I ended up going to work for that company. I signed a 12-month contract because wanted to take the opportunity to kind of refigure. I didn't still wanted to travel, but definitely didn't want my grandson growing up and not knowing who I was. And so how do you strike the balance between the two? Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, well, the original plan was for 3 months. Let's make it 12, and we'll just kind of take it slower and kind of figure out how can we do both. When I finished my trip, I left my bike in Las Vegas, so real affordable storage there and flights. So we traveled back and forth a little bit that winter. And so I guess fast forward to this past December, I signed another 12-month contract, but they can't, the business is small enough that it can't really afford my market rate, right? So I took a lot of compensation and paid time off. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we are today. But so we put the house up for sale. I've hired my replacement. So that gentleman's come on, is going to fully take over in May. And then the goal is to travel, 3 to 6 months. This is a beautiful place to be in the summertime. So we're tentatively now planning to travel for 3 to 6 months, travel and work, and then kind of come back and forth. That is the tentative plan now. So we were thinking Colombia and Ecuador, and talking to, in the meantime, when I come back from the trip, I met so many people who passed my name along. We had a huge amount of travelers come through this past summer from Argentina and the UK and Germany and Mexico. And we've got invites all over the world right now. And so talking to the German couple from Dusseldorf, they spent some time with us, and they shared Peru. Peru was kind of my original thought. So I think that's where we're going to be headed, is to Peru.
So you did your trip around the States and Canada, mm-hmm. and now you're still going ahead with selling the house and be doing a semi-nomadic lifestyle now. Yeah.
So my counterpart takes over for me in May, and there might be some availability or opportunity to work a certain amount remotely. So right now we're looking to go back down into the southern U.S. to get our feet wet, and then we'll probably head back in that neighborhood, either when the winter comes on, or possibly just go straight to South America. So I haven't decided yet.
But you're going to sell your house, so you won't have a place to come back to.
The house is on the market, and I've hired my replacement, so it's happening.
So you chose to retire with memories and no money rather than the money.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Pippa is there with you.
Pippa has decided to come along. We had after coming back from my trip, I'm definitely in better mental shape, and she didn't change the locks, which was great.
I gathered that, yeah. I think that was the time for her to kind of decide, which way that she wanted to go, with which way I was thinking about going, and in the end, we're going to do it together. So as far as this trip goes that you just did, and you were gone, and Pippa didn't change the locks, that was sort of an existential decision or point for your relationship then.
Absolutely. I was asked, constantly asked, how can you, you're married, right? Yeah. You have a mortgage, right? Yeah. You have no job? No. How? It was the most common question. But yeah, it was her, I ended up coming back from this trip and we were in sync, back in sync more than we had been.
Because when you're selling your home, it's everyone's home or both of you rather, your home that you're selling. And that's quite a bit of security for most of us, right? A place to go back to.
Yeah. And there was, it needs her signature on the paper. So, I can't just sell the house.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So no. And through those discussions, when I came back from the trip, we started to have those fundamental discussions about how we both wanted our lives to look like, how, first of all, do we need to look at them like together, right? Because if I'm going to go off and travel and there's those exceptional, I can't remember his name. He's a Yorkshireman. You interviewed him way back when he went to South Africa on a kind of an adventure, and then his wife, shipped him his flight.
Coats.
Yeah, and he didn't come back for 5 years.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
That's not Pippa. She's patient. So no, there was some risk there, right? We had some honest conversations about whether our story continued together or it continued separately. And our story is going to continue together as far as we can see. But I have, I want a relationship with this grandson of mine, and obviously so does she. And so we found our way through that to still do the things that now we both desire to do, but temper it in a way that doesn't, that includes, we're willing to pay that cost. And I come back to it, everything has a cost. And that total cost of getting, in Sam's case was 7 years. We weren't willing to pay that cost, myself included. So we found our way, to that adventure together.
So when you are doing the final signatures on that house sale, do you think you'll be scared?
Well, it's not, I don't like to use the word scared, apprehensive, but excited, right? It is, you are cutting a rope, a figurative rope, right? You will be homeless in that former sense, but we got together in '86. We often chuckle. We lived in a one bedroom apartment. Paid $225 a month for it. Tells you how long that was ago. But then again, you look at someone like Sam. He left off a corporate life and that potential that corporate lifestyle would gain him. And I've had long conversations with Sam about, not necessarily about regret, but that his life would have been totally different if he hadn't done what he had done. Mm. And anybody who's talked to Sam knows there's not an ounce of regret in the decision he made. So it's apprehension, but there's so many out there that have gone and done the thing the way that they wanted to do it. And the common denominator is zero regrets.
Well, Scott, we're going to have to talk down the road. And I think maybe we have to talk with Pippa as well to hear what life is like on the road and how things turn out. But I wish you the best of luck with this. And it sounds to me like you've either fixed what wasn't right for you or you've found what you're looking for.
Maybe a bit of both. But I think, definitely found a direction that we want to pursue. The future is undetermined.
Yeah. Scott, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
That was Scott Dobie from his home in British Columbia, Canada, at least until the house sells. We've got a bunch of photos from Scott's adventures as well as links in the show notes for this episode on our website, adventureriderradio.com. I just want to remind you that this episode has been brought to you by Green Chili Adventure Gear, greenchiliadv.com, Motobreeze Chain Oiler at motobreeze.com, and Best Rest Products at cyclepump.com. And we'd really appreciate it if anytime you're dealing with these companies, anytime email or otherwise, let them know you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. Wraps up another episode of Adventure Rider Radio, and we sure hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we did making it. Special thanks to our producer, Elizabeth Martin, and you, of course, thank you very much for being a part of the show by listening to it. Hey, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star review wherever you're finding your podcast, whether it's on iTunes, it doesn't matter where it is, but that helps other people find the show. And if you like what we're doing, maybe you listen every week, and we have our other show that we do, Adventure Rider Radio Raw, that comes out once a month. That comes out on the 21st of every month. We have another one coming out in a week, I think. All that information is available on our website, adventureriderradio.com. But the show is built on a model of advertising and listener support. We would really appreciate it if you would at least consider supporting the show. Drop by our website, adventureriderradio.com, click on support. And if you don't like the ads, most people do like the ads. That's what we hear, is most people like to know what's out there as far as products that are great products. And we're so lucky to have to be able to have just companies that have great products and services. But if you don't like the ads, there is an ad-free version available on our patron support system. So drop by the website, adventureriderradio.com, click on support, and then you'll see all the options to support the show. We would really appreciate it if you would just consider that. Please do that. Anyway, time to get out there and ride your bike if you can. My name is Jim Martin. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.
Hi, this is Jeremy Craker. You're listening to Adventure Rider Radio.